If you have anxiety or struggle with your boundaries or both, I really feel like this will be an incredibly helpful video for you. Understanding the connection between boundaries, anxiety, and assertiveness might actually change your life for the better. Okay, so I might have to piece this out a bit here, but boundaries are basically about knowing where you end and where others begin. Boundaries are about knowing yourself well, knowing your value and your values, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, kind of all of it, right? And anxiety is actually also about knowing where you end, because if we feel a little anxious about something and there's something we can do about it, we go ahead and we do it. I call that productive worry. Most of us, though, get really stuck in that unproductive worry, which is really about worrying about things you don't have any control over. So it's not accepting your own boundary. And then all of this goes into assertiveness and assertive communication. And the great thing about understanding assertive communication is that assertive communication can actually lower your anxiety and improve your boundaries. Let's start with what assertive communication is. The types of communication are aggressive, assertive, passive, and passive-aggressive. Now, aggressive communication is, most of us know what that is, particularly very aggressive communication. Aggressive communication is basically like, I only care about what I want, and I want to impose it on you. I want to impose on you my opinion. I want to impose on you what I want to get done out of this situation. I don't want to listen to you. So aggressive communication basically has the kind of underlying phrase of, I'm okay, not just okay, but pretty good, and you're not okay. That's aggressive. Passive communication is when you really just don't speak up for yourself. You don't assert your needs. You don't assert your beliefs. You don't say what you want or desire. You might agree with things you don't really agree with. You might just go along. So passive communication is basically based on, I'm not okay, but you're okay. Now, passive-aggressive communication, that's the hardest one for me for sure. Passive-aggressive communication is when you really don't state your needs, you don't state your values, you do not assert yourself effectively, but you're still trying to sabotage and get what you want. So passive-aggressive communication is almost like, I'm not okay, but you're not okay either, and I want to get what I want at all cost. So let's come to assertive communication. I'm okay, you're okay. Assertive communication is, I get to state my needs, my desires, my wants, my opinions, my beliefs, but I don't have to force them on you. You don't have to agree with me. You don't even have to like what I say, and I can still say it. Many people confuse assertiveness with aggressiveness. So assertiveness can be, I want to take care of my needs here, but generally it's not stepping on the other person. It's not like stepping on their feet or pushing them out of the way. So I'm going to use a pretty easy example here. And again, I know often in life things are way more complicated than this, but sometimes using these simple examples helps us understand how thoroughly we get stuck in one of these patterns of communication for no reason. So you're at a restaurant, you order your sandwich, but you don't want them to put the pickles on it. So you ask them, I'd like the sandwich, this kind of bread, no pickles. They bring you the sandwich, they got your bread right, but they put pickles on it. If you kind of sit back in your chair and you're like, it's okay, I'll pick them off myself, or I'll just eat it, but I'm not going to say anything, and that we could call passive. If you call the server over and you just start screaming at them, this happened the last time I was here too, and that's aggressive, no need. But if you politely call the server over and you say, hey, I wanted the sandwich with no pickles, do you mind having them flip this for a sandwich with no pickles? Reasonable request. That's assertive. I think that with passive-aggressive, you might just kind of whine, I really didn't want the pickles, but it's okay. I'll eat it because I'm just nice. I don't want to impose on anybody else. You complain about it enough that your partner or whoever you're sitting with offers to switch their meal for yours, which is what you really wanted, and you just keep whining until you get that. So that could be the passive-aggressive. Anyway, if you think about that as a situation, it's a pretty simple one. If it's very low stakes, why are you getting super aggressive or being super passive? I used to work as a waitress, right? So I know that if a customer got something they didn't want and they called me over, I would go flip it for free, right? Get them the new piece and they would be happier. And if I did it nicely, they would be happy. They'd leave me a nice tip. So this is what happens in restaurants, right? If you are falling into either aggressive, passive, or passive aggressive in a simple situation like that, just imagine with the more difficult situations in your life. Okay, so how does that tie back to boundaries and anxiety? Well, if you fall into that passive category, you probably feel a lot of anxiety when you have to assert yourself. You maybe learned very young that your opinions didn't matter, or that expressing your needs was sort of useless, so why bother doing it? But you somehow learned that expressing your needs, wants, desires, opinions was not okay. And when we learn these things young in a situation where we are really trying to stay attached to our caregiver, because as a child, our survival is dependent on our caregivers. So the things that threaten that connection make us anxious as children, which is appropriate. Unfortunately, they develop into habits that we carry forward the rest of our lives. So if you learned very young to stay attached to your caregiver, keep your mouth closed. Don't express your opinion. Don't talk about what you need. You don't do it as an adult. It's a hard habit to change. I am not saying it's easy, but it is worth it. And practicing in those smaller situations, super helpful. Assert your desire when you're choosing a restaurant to go out to. Assert your desire when you're picking a TV show to watch. And if you're able to do it assertively, but not aggressively, right? But clear, calm, generally it goes over well. And then you get what you want. You get to go to the restaurant you wanted or watch the TV show you wanted. And then that's reinforcing. So it both strengthens your sense of self, it strengthens your boundaries, and it lowers your anxiety. It's so much easier to be straightforward. If we're anxiously dancing around, oh, I can't say this, I don't want to get that person mad, that's all anxiety. That's all anxiety, right? Now, if you're on the other side of that example and you get super aggressive, it might also be because you've been taught you can't rely on anybody else. You got to do it all yourself. Nobody's going to care about you. And you're interpreting it as a signal that you're not important on a deep level. I'm not saying consciously. I'm not saying that you're thinking that you're not important when the wait person screws up your order. But on a very deep level, you're reacting with a survival mode reaction. So probably you also learned very young that unless you were super aggressive, you weren't going to get, your needs were not going to get met, right? Learning there is a way to balance your needs with other people's needs. So I'm thinking you might be listening to this and saying like, okay, sure, sounds great, but how do I do it? Well, it does take some work. Often it does take some guidance. And actually in the boundary program I have, we have an entire module on assertive communication and how that works with your boundaries. So stay with me here for a moment because I am going to talk a little bit more about this feedback loop between boundaries, assertive communication, and anxiety. But I also just want you to know that if this really is something that you want to do some work on, this boundary program really pulls together all my experience from being a psychotherapist for 20 years, as well as my personal experience developing healthy boundaries, assertive communication, and really reducing my anxiety to very, very little amount. And I do pull it all together in an effective 8-week program. I'll show the link here, and the link will be in the description to this video. But okay, let's go back to that feedback loop. As you become less anxious, as you work on your anxiety and you lower your anxiety, you'll be able to speak more assertively, right? If you're not feeling nervous about the outcome of something, if you're not worrying about what you can't control, like somebody else's emotions, you'll be able to be more like, yeah, I'm okay, you're okay, and this is what I want. What do you want? Maybe tonight we do what you want, but tomorrow we do what I want. Similarly, as you speak more assertively, you're setting boundaries more clearly, your anxiety will go down. And of course, as you get better with your boundaries, anxiety goes down, you get more experience speaking assertively. They all help each other and are helped by, right? So as you begin to work on one, it impacts the others. And I want to just summarize 2 types of anxiety that I've been talking about. One, I'm going to call assertion anxiety. That term may have been invented here, but that's where you are too anxious to assert yourself, coming from not being allowed to have your own opinions, beliefs, being with others who are too aggressive. So we have to lower the anxiety And I also just shot a video on constant anxiety and how anxiety is really a signal that your body thinks it's in physical danger. Most of the time when we need to speak assertively, we're not in physical danger. So I'll link that video at the end, but understanding that that fear response isn't needed anymore. And then let's talk about control anxiety, which is a lot of us have anxiety about what we can't control, but we want to control. So we want to control other people's reactions. We want to control the future. We want to control the outcome of something, but it's not in our hands, but we are not going to let that go. And we hold on to it tighter and tighter and tighter. Yet accepting what you're powerless over really can make your life way more easy. That was getting complicated to say. And it's not about being a doormat. It's actually a way to feel more joy. It's like, wow, yeah, I really can't control that person. Whoa, what does that free up, right? Or I can't control the outcome of that event. Whoosh, I have all this extra space in my head once I accept. I can't control it. And again, what's that about? Boundaries, understanding anxiety. I hope this was super useful for you. Assertiveness, boundaries, anxiety, very intertwined. Please do leave me a comment. Let me know if this made sense to you, if it was helpful, if you have questions about it. Again, the link to my program is in the description, and I hope to see you there.